If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations will be open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 195 members voting yea, 139 nay, the motion to override is defeated. The governor's veto is sustained. The House will attend to the governor's veto message on HB 687 FN. The House will attend to the governor's veto message on this bill relative to extreme risk protection orders. The question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 687 FN become law? The chair recognizes the member from Goffstown, Representative Burt, to speak in support of sustaining the veto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whoops. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 687 will allow an angry relative or a former boyfriend, girlfriend, a disgruntled neighbor, or pretty much anyone else to petition a court in an ex parte hearing and to strip you of your Second Amendment rights with nothing but a list of unsustainable allegations. House Bill 687 is written to allow an extreme low burden of proof of almost no proof at all. House Bill 687 specifically allows telephonic hearings without the accused present. And the accused or the respondent, as HB 687 refers to the gun owner, will only learn that he or she is subject to an order when the police arrive to confiscate their lawful owned guns. Mr. Speaker, I am very happy that the Supreme Court has agreed with me on a case before them with my name on it. Mr. Speaker, they understand what constitutional rights are. I also understand what constitutional rights are. This bill is against many of them. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope you will now join me and press the worn out red button. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 687 become law? The chair recognizes the member from Portsmouth, Representative Muse, to speak in support of the override.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. Since the debate first began on this bill in the 2019 session, we've heard conflicting assessments of what this bill is and what this bill is not. What this bill is a civil protective order that temporarily prohibits access to firearms in cases where a person posing an immediate threat of harm to themselves or others. A person subject to an extreme risk protective order legally retains ownership of the firearms they surrender. No one is permanently deprived of their property under this bill. Once the order is no longer in effect, a respondent can petition the court to have their weapons returned. What this bill is not, no matter how many times opponents will tell you that it is unconstitutional. Courts in 3 other states have confirmed similar laws, and since this bill was first introduced, 6 additional states have passed their own versions of it, for a total of 19 states plus the District of Columbia. The United States Supreme Court has also made it clear in several decisions that pre-hearing deprivations are constitutional, especially in emergency situations. New Hampshire courts have also upheld similar temporary deprivations in our own domestic violence restraining order law. What this bill really is at its most basic level is a way to put a protective legal barrier in front of a person who has access to the most lethal means available to do harm to themselves or to others by temporarily taking those lethal weapons out of the equation using a civil procedure. No one gets arrested and no criminal record is created unless the respondent violates the order. What this bill does is provide a way for family members or law enforcement to intercede before depression or unchecked mental illness leads to suicide, or before uncontrollable rage or delusions lead to innocent lives being lost. As I said back in January when the House first passed this bill, this body has a choice. We can continue to allow our gun laws to fail the victims of suicide and their families. We can also continue to delude ourselves into thinking that our gun laws are fine just the way they are, until our own failure to act sees a city or town in New Hampshire get added to a list that no New Hampshire community should ever be on. Or we can do something else. Today we can choose to act together and override the governor's veto. If you believe attending a hearing is better than attending a funeral, please vote yes and allow HB 687 to become law in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 687 become law? The chair recognizes the member from Salem, Representative Addison, to speak in support of sustaining the veto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of sustaining the governor's veto. This bill will deprive someone of their property rights and their Second Amendment rights without any notice before that person has committed a crime or has ever appeared in court. When that person does appear in court, the court will not follow the traditional rules of evidence, and the court can make a decision to deprive you of your property rights by relying solely on hearsay. When the order expires, you know, that order that allowed the government to seize your assets, your property, is no longer in effect. Your property is not automatically returned to you, and there are situations where your property will not be returned to you. This order could deprive someone of their property when they're not even named as the respondent in the petition. A firearm is merely a tool. It's not the motivation. According to this common form of suicide for women is not by the use of firearm. This bill simply does not focus on helping all people in crisis. It simply focuses on disarming a person. It does not offer them the support that they need to deal with their internal struggles. For those of you who agree with me that this unconstitutional bill merely focuses on only confiscating firearms, please join me in pushing that red button. Thank you.
Question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 687 become law? The chair recognizes a member from Stratham, Representative Alschuler, to speak in support of the override.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. We are halfway through the month of September, which is Suicide Prevention Month. Pre-COVID, the increase in New Hampshire's suicide rate was the third highest in the nation. Between 2013 and 17, 1,200 New Hampshire residents have died by suicide, which increased our state's suicide rate by 48%. We should all shudder to think of what will be in the next report. We have higher than the national average of suicide deaths, and when we break that down by region, Coos County actually has double the national average. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in New Hampshire for people between the ages of 10 and 34. But these are statistics. Who are the people behind them? When we passed this bill last January, we heard the heart-wrenching story of George Tilton, a student here at UNH who had interventions from both family and law enforcement not once, but 2 times in less than 2 years. But because George had not reached a crisis level that would set an involuntary commitment into motion, which, if it had been, would have temporarily relieved him from his firearms. We have that now in New Hampshire. Nor had George committed domestic violence, which also would have temporarily removed his firearms. Neither one of those instances applied, so there was absolutely nothing stopping George from purchasing a firearm in crisis and then using it to kill himself in his car in Dover in a parking lot. Late afternoon on August 7th, Governor Sununu vetoed House Bill 687. And on August 10th, Amy Moulter, a mother of 4, a waitress at the Longhorn Steakhouse in Newington, was killed by her ex-boyfriend Rudy Ferretti with a single shot to the head. And then Rudy Ferretti took his own life with another single shot to the head. A preventable murder-suicide just up the road here in Dover. Why did I say preventable? Because Rudy sent up red flags in his community for years, and there was absolutely nothing anyone could do here in New Hampshire because New Hampshire doesn't have an extreme risk protective order that would have temporarily relieved Rudy Ferretti from his firearms. And so here we are, 2 more people dead. A firearm increases lethality in a suicide attempt. In fact, of the suicides attempted with firearms, they are completed 90% of the time. We don't have to live like this. Suicide isn't inevitable. It's actually preventable. So I echo my colleague in saying, why are funerals more acceptable to us than a court hearing? Please, by pressing the green button, override this veto so we can stop wringing our hands in despair and actually save some lives.
The question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 687 become law? Pursuant to the New Hampshire Constitution, this will be a roll call vote. Members will kindly take their seats.
Roll call.
The question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 687 become law? The chair recognizes Representative Nodder for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this red flag bill will deprive a person of their property rights without that person having any notice of appearing in court, and if I know that in some circumstances this temporary order could permanently deprive a person of their property rights even after this temporary order expires or is vacated. Further, if I know that this red flag bill focuses on disarming an individual but ignores the mental health issues that are often associated with suicide, would I then press the red button to sustain the governor's veto? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 687 become law? I remind members that we're in the voting mode and members should be in the seat, and particularly the member from Franklin, who's way off second base. I thank the member for returning to his seat. The chair recognizes Representative Nancy Murphy for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that New Hampshire has a rising rate of suicide that is higher than the national average, is the second leading cause of death for people between the ages of 10 and 34, and that having an extreme risk protective order in place as a tool for families and law enforcement to use when they see a loved one spiraling into despair or danger is an effective and constitutionally sound way to prevent tragedy. And if I know that in more than 50% of mass shootings in America, the shooter had exhibited at least one red flag prior to shooting. And finally, if I know that suicide and mass shootings are not inevitable, they can be prevented, and extreme risk protection orders are a critical tool to have in this fight, then will I now press the green button and vote to override the governor's veto of House Bill 687 and save the lives of Granite Staters. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall House Bill 687 FN become law? The state constitution requires a roll call vote. A 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of the bill becoming law, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you'll press the red button. Voting stations will now be open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will be attentive to the state of the vote. With 182 members voting yea, 156 voting nay, the 2/3 was not reached to override the governor's veto is sustained. Thank you.
How we doing? Oh, back again. Had to take things a little easy for a minute. This is Locally Sourced. Welcome. I'm Carter Hammond, host. News, political commentary, local updates, all that jazz. Y'all know the deal. Follow us on Twitter. Support us on Patreon. Subscribe to the YouTube. Hit the little bell for notifications. You can find out whenever these live streams happen. Usually they happen on Wednesdays and Thursdays for anybody who's not aware. But generally I think we've, established a rhythm. Got a rhythm going. So, it's time to sort of check back in after that whole absurd primary. And, I do want to sort of take a moment to talk about the audio that we were just listening to with today is essentially veto day. Normally it would be at the State House. It's happening, I believe, at UNH. And essentially right now what's happening, for anybody who doesn't know what this is, right, what they're what all this absurdity is. This is my word, absurdity, for everything that's happening right now, because I don't know what else to call it. Essentially, what we were listening to and ultimately watching at the beginning of the stream just now is the House deciding whether or not to sustain or reject Governor Sununu's vetoes. Now, the thing about this, that for anybody who's not fully literate on what's going on, I know I have a lot of people who pay attention to this show that are very much so involved in the political process and understand the nuts and bolts. So we have different people at different knowledge levels in terms of granularity of government knowledge. So for many people listening, this will be a bit of a rehash, but basically, right now, though Democrats have a majority in both the House and Senate, they don't have a veto-proof majority, which means that Governor Sununu can basically veto all day long, and as long as Republicans in the House and the Senate hold the line, then just on party lines, then the Democrats can never actually get anything through. So this is what has produced the stagnancy that we've seen within the past 4 years that we've had Governor Sununu, right? Everybody talks about, and not even necessarily the 4 years, it's really the 2 years since 2018. Like, this all really kicked off after we saw the House and the Senate both turn blue. The Senate turning blue is a pretty big deal considering how intensely they've gerrymandered the Senate districts, right? So that's a big component of things. Now, Democrats actually took back the Senate and managed to continue to do well in the House. And what that led to was them actually being able to put forward a lot of really great bills, honestly. Like, we can sit here, we can hem and haw all day about like, oh, I want something better. I mean, there is a certain reality to the fact that there's a lot of Democrats that are putting up some really, really solid, cool legislation. And I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to actually spend more time getting folks who are really elected to office, who are doing some of this work, who are really coming up with some of these interesting ideas of how to propose change. Like, even if none of it ever makes it through, right? None of ever manages to get past the gate, because again, what we just watched was the shooting down of red flag laws, and we can talk about the insanity of that in a moment. But ultimately, there are a lot of folks that have been on this show already, folks that I'm hoping to have on within the next few weeks, especially as the general election season ramps up, which is another thing we're going to talk about on the show today. I think it's really important to highlight some of the actual legislative ideas here. And also it's important to understand the process by which those legislative ideas that are really good get tossed right out. Now, red flag laws, at the top of the episode, for anybody who doesn't know what a red flag law is, it essentially, I would say, go back and listen to the top of the episode again, because it actually, the defenders, the people who are saying they want to override Sununu's veto, they do a really good job of explaining exactly what the purpose is. And actually, just for the sake of it, we'll pull this up, and I will talk about this momentarily. It wasn't necessarily on that, it's one of those things when I sat down and I sort of have the list of topics that I wanted to discuss today, and then veto day comes along and it throws a whole wrench in the process. So, please excuse the clicks. Okay. Let's see here. Sorry about this, folks. Yeah, here we go. Back on my big delays with the solo stream. It happens. Can't win them all. Yeah. So okay, I got it. We made it to it. This is we'll be okay. We'll we'll get through this. So, okay, here we go. This is some bill text, and I'll try and make this a little bit bigger here so that folks can read it. So, yeah, and again, Manny Esposito, he's like, we've got some really good people who got down on this. I mean, even my senator is in here. So, at any rate, this bill establishes procedure for issuing extreme risk protection orders to protect against persons who pose an immediate risk of harm to themselves or others. Okay. Finds that allowing family or household members or law enforcement officers to petition for a court order. So petition, you have to have people that care about you or people that know you, petition for a court to order temporary access restriction to firearms by the individual, the person who everybody is friends with or everybody knows, if that individual is found to pose an immediate risk to themselves or others, if that court order is in the interest of public safety, then essentially they would be able to issue an order that takes away somebody's firearms for a temporary period of time until they are better. This is, as we heard at the top of the episode, this is absolutely, it's the conservative argument is that this is unconstitutional, which, like, this isn't this isn't civil forfeiture. Like, it's not permanent confiscation for any period of time. It is based off of a community response. Like, okay, so here's what gets me, right? Here's what gets me about the whole argument is I see frequently conservative or just really like central liberal people just, I want to return to family values. Give me that return to family values. And realistically, taking your guns away from your crazy uncle so he doesn't shoot people seems like family values to me. And what would be more in line with those values than to codify them into law? It's just kind of confounding to me that there's such a separation of the ideas, despite them, to me, seeming relatively similar. I don't know. It's a little ridiculous. It's definitely a little bit ridiculous, but we cannot win them all, unfortunately. And so, okay, maybe this will start my big segue, traveling throughout the nonsense of our state politics. Yeah, so okay, let's go for it. Dan Feltes, folks, won the primary. Beat Andrew Volinsky, but it was really narrow. And I mean, narrow in the sense that it was not the astounding defeat that Steve Marchand experienced the last two times he ran. A lot of reasons as to why this is the case. I think there's a lot to be said for it being part of the climate. There's the current climate. There's a lot to be said for Volinsky's record as defending representing the plaintiffs in the Claremont lawsuit. So, and he absolutely had the support of Sunrise. He had the support of 350. He had the support of NHYM. So there's a lot of this sort of progressive energy, which I think the left in New Hampshire, the Democrats in New Hampshire, I think, realized that it would be very, very, at this point, to see the 47% that Volinsky took out of that election, right? Which is brought on by increasing economic conditions, a really just difficult time that folks are having with COVID, with the fact that the state itself has remained underfunded for a really long time. In regards to COVID, we talk about the education component and how much education is playing into things right now. Volinsky being a huge champion of that. It's just kind of like there were certain things that kind of fell into line why Volinsky, as a progressive candidate at this moment, his situation that occurred with BLM and the way he handled that whole thing and the way he came back around and still managed to get all of that support was like, you come back in and get that endorsement. Like, he kind of showed a lot of what the more progressive left in New Hampshire wants to see out of a candidate. And frankly, I had a takeaway myself that, like, I think if you look at the maps and how, from town to town, who voted what way, all the way up across the state, I think there's a really solid argument for running a progressive primary challenger against Danny Kuster in 2022 because of how much support you see in House District 2 for progressive policies there actually is, right? It's really increasing. This isn't the district that Charlie Bass owned back in, the 90s, 80s, 90s. So I just kind of want to get that out there. But at any rate, Dan Feltes is making some very interesting moves, and I kind of want to discuss this and discuss what we, anybody who's watching this show on the regular knows that I'm very much so a leftist myself, that I'm very much so I very much so identify as democratic socialist. I tend to just have very left-leaning perspectives on things, and much of a part of this show is designed to push back on overly center or openly right-wing media publications. So we're gonna be a little bit more radical in our language, and I'm gonna be, look, I understand it's very not in fashion to be criticizing your current candidate that you're supporting in the general election, but if we don't do this, then we are not preparing ourselves to understand what we need to when it comes to maintaining the accountability with a more center-leaning candidate like Dan Feltes. So what I'm gonna put up right here is so I'll talk about this a little bit, and then I'll sort of explain the context for anybody who's not fully aware. So this is a tweet from Adam Sexton. We got a clip here. I'll play it in a minute. I'll just let it go. So here we go.
And what I said during the debate was we ought to move forward with the commutation process. Any first-time commutation petition should have a process. And in this particular situation, with the facts that we know, I highly doubt that the Executive Council would vote to commute. But if it did, I would negate that vote. And what I said during the debate was we ought to move forward.
So here he is openly saying that he's going to stop. He would stop an attempt to to commute Michael Addison's sentence. This, and actually we just, we do have the original audio right here.
Would you commute Addison's death sentence as governor?
I think there is a process in place with the executive council and the governor. If the council voted to commute Addison's sentence, I would approve that.
Senator, as governor, would you?
I agree with Andrew and that process. Look, you put it before the council. We repealed the death penalty. If the council voted to do that, we would move forward with that.
So, I mean, look,
Counselor,
this is
would you
just,
commute
he's just straight up lying. And that kind of flip-flop is really, really not okay, right? Like, that's, seeing that happen right there, just those two clips side by side, like, that should send serious alarm bells up to anyone, okay, about exactly what we are signing up for by getting behind a candidate like Dan Feltes. This is what we're going to have to deal with. And I'm sorry if anybody feels salty that I'm coming at this. I am not the only progressive that came at this. But the reality is that I know that people are absolutely being critical of this issue, but I want to open it up and say that if folks aren't totally cognizant of the fact that this is gonna happen with other issues too. The second he meets with the police, he's backing this point. He's all of a sudden just, so this shows us just how much he'll bend over to an authoritarian slap. And right now, any bit of conceding that he's doing to progressives is inevitably only because of how narrow that margin was during that primary. I promise you. If Feltes, right, okay, if Feltes had the type of lead over Volinsky that Molly Kelly had over Marchand in 2018, we wouldn't be hearing about any of this capitulation. So they'd just be writing off the progressive left of New Hampshire categorically. And right now they can't quite. But this is an interesting place because we can really like this is in a way it's kind of ideal, because as long as he keeps stepping in it, it gives us way more power when we do get something. And when we do get something, it gives us a reason to be far more skeptical of it. I will get to that in a minute, but first what I want to do is I want to take a moment to actually sort of dive into the Michael Addison case itself, because I realized that I myself did not know really enough on the story, what happened, to speak on it. Now, I'm not super enamored with the idea of covering crime on this channel. That's not really my I find media centered around that to be, especially sort of more of like a street level crime. I don't know. I find it to be very anti-poor oftentimes. So I just don't want to, I really try to not engage with it as much myself, or as much as I can anyways. But this is, we're going to have to discuss this a little bit. It's just part of the deal. So, okay. Here we have article from Seacoast Online. Let's see if I can make this, whoops. Let's see if I can make this bigger for you folks. Okay, so there we go. All right. So essentially what happened was Addison had been implicated in several recent violent crimes. see here. I just want to get, I'm going to scroll through because I do, another thing is I do want to be able to, acknowledge the value of the work that other journalists are actually doing for this. Okay, police arrested another man at the shooting scene on unrelated charges. They said the man, Antoine Bell Rogers, 21, had gone with Addison to an apartment building Sunday night and fired shots at it repeatedly. Neighbors said the shots narrowly missed a father and son. According to arrest warrants, the alleged shooting stemmed from threats made by a resident of the building, both Addison and Rogers were charged, but neither had been arrested when Briggs confronted them. Police were looking for a third person, Angela Swist, who, with Addison, was the target of that alleged threat. Addison is also charged with robbing a Hudson convenience store at gunpoint last week. Authorities are also investigating whether he committed 2 other armed robberies in Manchester and Milford last week. Addison was arrested in Manchester in 2002 and 2004 for being a fugitive from justice in Massachusetts, where he was wanted for assault and aggravated assault. In 2003, Addison himself was the victim of a shooting. His assailant was sentenced to jail. Police officers, including about a dozen from Manchester, packed Addison's arraignment, which he listened to from the holding area. His cousin, Tia Wilson, 26, who said he has 2 young daughters with his girlfriend in New Hampshire, the Boston Globe reported on its website. Quote, "He is a good person. He takes care of his kids," Wilson said. "He is innocent until proven guilty." So, okay. Here's the deal, right? That's essentially the boil down of it. Right now, what happened was there was the warrant. Addison hadn't been arrested yet. Briggs was approaching him. Addison just turned and opened fire. Briggs didn't even have his gun drawn, right? Not okay. It's not okay. I really want to point out that, like, Kelly Ayotte cut her fucking teeth on this. She made it a mission to get death sentence for Michael Addison. Like, that was her thing. Like, she really, that was, like, I mean, she campaigned on that, right? And I can't think of, it's, in a way, the story to me is so indicative. It's like exactly why and how New Hampshire has a race problem. Like 100%. Because what this shows is, like, it's such a cursory look, and it's incredible, like, how dare you attack our police? Let me tell you something. All respect to Michael Briggs. All respect to him. It's as a human being, I don't like hearing that anybody was shot and killed. Here's a certain reality. Police officers constantly talk about how dangerous their job is. First off, it's not even I don't think it's even in the top. If it's in the top 10 most dangerous jobs in the United States, it's very, very low on the list. Actually, yeah, roofers, pilots, fishers, log workers are number one. I mean, here's the deal. Police just aren't even in the top 10. They're not. landscapers, lawn service, groundskeeping workers, construction trades, extraction, structural iron and steel workers, farmers, ranchers, other agricultural workers, drivers, sales workers and truck drivers, refuse and recyclable materials collectors, roofers, pilots. Police aren't even in the top 10. So we hear from the constituency supportive of police that they put their lives on the line every day, that it's so dangerous what they do. It's such a dangerous job, and that we really need to show them our respect. Where's the respect for all of that labor? Where is the respect for all of those laborers who put more of their life on the line every single day? They put their lives more at risk every single day to provide for us, to make sure that we have food, right? To make sure that we have transportation, to make sure that we have infrastructure. Okay, those people really, like, that stuff is just, we really need that stuff, no doubt, right? Police, they don't quite enter into this stage yet. We're not at that point. But let's take the straw man, okay? Let's take the straw man that that police are doing an incredibly dangerous job. They're doing one of the most dangerous jobs in the country, right? Let's take this straw man and go with it for a second. Well, if that's what you sign up for as your job, and you're going to advocate for individual decision making and all that, right? Well, then by that rationale, Michael Briggs made the choice to put himself on the line, knowing every day that somebody could just turn around and shoot him, which is exactly what happened. And that's part of that's part of what you sign up for. So why there's no outrage when we arrest and detain delivery workers in New York City during coronavirus who are literally in the middle of bringing food to people, and they're thrown in jail in the middle of their shift because they are out past curfew, even though they're still they're mandated to stay open because they are deemed an essential worker. This type of insanity. The hypocrisy is very rank, and it doesn't quite make sense to be advocating that it's so egregious, and the punishment for hurting a police officer must be so much harder when we don't hold police officers to the same standard for disrupting other essential services required for daily life. Furthermore, that's just it's part of the game. If you're going to be a police officer, you need to sign up for that, and we can't be outraged or surprised when a police officer is injured or even killed on the line of duty, because again, as they so frequently want to tell us, that is what they do. So it's kind of a wanting to have your cake and eat it too type of thing, and it's just not really. It doesn't. For me, that argument doesn't really hold water. Now, all of this aside, there is that final point. There is that final point from Addison's cousin Tia Wilson. Saying he's a good person and he takes care of his kids. And when I read that, right, what I try to remember when I think about that is that we are all fully complicated individuals. And whatever it was that caused Michael Addison to turn around and pull the trigger that day without any reason, chances are that whatever the thought process that was in his head that led him to that point probably was some sort of convergence of personal challenges through interpersonal relationships that he had throughout his life, from the day he was born to the day he pulled the trigger. There is the societal component, and the dynamic of systemic othering, like social othering that occurs for Black, Indigenous, and people of color in this particular area of the country. New England has a very, very interesting brand of super old school racism that doesn't think it's racist, and that has a very, very, very consistent method of keeping down non-white individuals in this region, as much as people would like to not admit it. And then there's, aside from the racial dimension, there's also just simply the economic and cultural dimension of not having enough and being forced to work with what you're given, which in the context of historical redlining and sort of the, ghettoization of certain areas that had long-term impacts on underfunding in certain communities that led communities to not be able to have what they need, which allowed for even further proliferation of drugs and violence to become the only means to sustain that community. Like that's what you get. Like that's when that's all you have to work with. You're kind of making lemonade out of lemons. And when I look at Michael Addison's case, I have to think like this is not the time for us to be sentencing a man to death. Is it egregious? Absolutely. Does life in prison make perfect sense? Yeah, I think it does. And another thing I'd like to point out is that aside from just administering a death sentence being incredibly expensive, like it's a very expensive process from that standpoint alone, it makes no sense. There is no, like, I always have trouble understanding the moral or the argument that the death penalty is somehow worse than life in prison, because life in prison implies that this person will, rather than no longer experiencing from a certain point in the near future forward, this person will have to continue their experience until their naturally determined end of days, knowing that they lost their privilege to access society. And that to me seems like a far, far more intense punishment than taking the life of somebody. And it also creates opportunity for, despite that person being behind bars, for them to potentially do something positive with the remainder of their life, regardless of where they are being detained or the term or method in which they are being detained. So like I said, we're all fully complex individuals that live in a fully complex society that does a whole lot to keep through maintaining an order, keep individuals down, and create conditions under which normal logic, like don't turn around and shoot a police officer first before they even pull a gun on you, actually seems like a reasonable decision to make. And that's the type of thing that we need to be asking ourselves about. What the hell brought Michael Addison to even be thinking that in that moment, like that was the solution to do? Right? He shouldn't die for it. We should be asking ourselves, what about our society, our place? Like if this guy is from the New Hampshire and Massachusetts area, how are we failing that? Why are we not trying to interact with our most underserved and undervalued and depreciated and exploited and subverted members of our society. I don't understand it. I really don't understand why we're not doing that more. So at any rate, that was absolutely the reason to not withhold not to hold firm to carrying out the death sentence. Why it seems absurd that Feltes would flip on this position. It just seems incredibly unnuanced to me, relatively unhumanitarian. I find it pretty disgusting. So I think everybody should take note of that flip-flop and remember that moving forward with this guy, that if you actually, like, look, yes, he has solid progressive positions. He's wrote bills and stuff like that that's come out, and it's been really, has been somewhat positive, although I think the $12 minimum wage thing was absolute bullshit. I think I would have spat on that bill and sent it back saying do better or get out of my face. And that's a hot take, but I don't really give a damn. So I don't, is it better than Sununu? Absolutely, it's better than Sununu. Is it good? Fuck no. Fuck no. Caveat, today's stream is going to be laced with profanity. And if you are offended by any of that, I suggest bracing for it, or maybe just tuning out now and catching it when you find yourself in a more private context, or you are more mentally ready to handle that profanity. But I am not stopping for jack shit. So anyways, that's the bad side of it. Let me say something relative. It's like, this is gonna be funny because it's not like, I can't even be 100 about it, man. Okay, I will talk about something somewhat good here. So Dan may not be able to hold his position when it comes to when it comes to the death penalty. But he also seems to have not been able to hold his position on marijuana either, which is actually a good thing for folks. So he has adopted Andrew Volinsky's marijuana legalization plan. Now, this is surface good, cool. Right, here's the thing. After literally everything that I just talked about, there is so little trust that this will actually happen. So the response is, cool, let's see you get into office and make it happen. Because right now, this is just like pennies in the wishing fountain with a fucking 24-point gap between you and Sununu. And the general, you got like, I don't know, not even 2 months. Get out of here. This is, this is good. Okay. Maybe it locked down more of the progressive vote. I don't know that this is really the solution though, right? Like, I don't, it's, I would have loved to have seen him adopt this policy and not say the dumb bullshit about the death sentence for Michael Addison, but I can't get everything you want in this life. I tell you, folks, this is just, it's a damn shame. Look, the policy itself is really good. Okay. So, key points: legalize possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana for people aged 21 and over, and allow for homegrown adult use. Volinsky noted that Sununu vetoed legislation permitting patients to grow medical marijuana. Now, obviously, those vetoes, as we saw at the top of the episode, will just continue to get sustained by a non-supermajority House and Senate. So this is why it is so crucial to vote down ballot. Folks, I'm sorry, this is why state rep races matter so much. Because the House has an incredible amount of power in that sense. I think that, and I think we really need to take a hard look at the Senate. I think anybody who wants to hear more about what I mean when I say we need to take a harder look at the Senate, I would encourage you to go back and check out the interview that I did with Tony LaBranche, who is an incredible state rep candidate that everybody should be paying attention to. Like, wow, just like exactly the type of candidate that that the left needs out there in New Hampshire. So I would highly suggest going back and taking a look at that interview, because Tony says some solid stuff there. But at any rate, moving on, licensed companies or cooperatives to sell marijuana at New Hampshire liquor stores. Great idea. Decriminalize possession of marijuana for those between 18 and 21 years old to make it make it a non-criminal violation and expunge their records for past marijuana possession. Yes, hell yes. And especially the expunge their records for past marijuana possession, because that is utter crap that folks have to walk around with that on their record. I got one on mine. And the thing is, it doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot, but you feel this weird societal pressure to bring it up sometimes. No, I mean, this is, frankly, it's happened to me. It's happened to me twice in my life. And the first time was a bunch of bullshit. The second time was a little bit less bullshit, but still kind of bullshit. And the reality is this just should be legal now. Like, I have my own reasons for using it, but there are many people that I know personally that use it very, very specifically for medical purposes. It is very, very helpful for a lot of folks, and we're behind, and there's absolutely no reason that we can't just make this a thing. Absolutely none. Create and build a New Hampshire marijuana industry that would encourage local growers to base their operations in property poor areas, specifically Coos, Sullivan, and Cheshire counties. That is huge. This is what we're talking about. Looking at expanding that economic base, trying to create new types of industry, especially when we have such a really great rhythm in this state going on with like the microbrew situation. I think we've got a lot of farmers market options. I think this is totally the type of thing that could really, really just take right off. Just take right off here in New Hampshire. So, and then obviously tax marijuana as a new revenue source to fund education. Boom, that's a no-brainer. Create a cannabis control board to oversee testing of marijuana for potency and to be sure that there is no contamination. Fantastic. The board would also oversee regulation of wholesale and retail operations and work with the State Department Revenue Administration in tax collection. So there's already sort of this consideration for how exactly we roll this process out. Fund drug and alcohol mental health treatment with a portion of wholesale and retail revenues. Boom, done. This is all no-brainer stuff, folks. This is really, really easy, and we can just have more money and have more access. So it's fantastic that there's an adoption of this program, and it's definitely another reason to co-sign and try and convince folks why they need to be supporting Feltes in the primary. But again, I think it's I hate to sound like and like is weird, because normally I would say that like the anybody but Trump argument, like that type of an argument, is a really, really fucking horrible one. But at the same time, if I take the base structure of that that specific example and I extrapolate it instead to be applied to Sununu and Feltes, well, in that context, I think it is far more advantageous at this particular moment and this is sort of the main takeaway, this is the big takeaway that I have from the primary night, right? Is that it's far more advantageous of us right now if there is indeed a 24 point gap between Sununu and Feltes. That's an absurd number to close. That is a preposterous point gap to try and close, much less overcome in less than 2 months. It's utter insanity. So what's the strategy to getting there, right? The strategy is certainly not arguing for why Dan Feltes is a great candidate, because he's not. I'm sorry. A wet fish at a debate like that is not a great candidate, and he's gonna get slapped sideways by Sununu's charisma in any kind of debate context, much less just his very, like, you know, peanut butter no jelly kind of approach to to talking about stuff when Sununu's out here like taking dewy-eyed pictures of sandcastles with his kid and galvanizing the conservatives, right? As he's trying to unite post a weird fallout during COVID, and he's actually relying on Democrats to give him votes. That's like what? So if you're a Democrat and you're approving of, say, Sununu's handling of coronavirus, right? You know, I think Sununu did a good job. Oh, well, you know, I feel like he didn't do so bad with coronavirus. You know, like, I don't know, he seems like he's doing a pretty good job, right? So people are going to point to COVID-19 and they're going to use that as the example for why they feel like Sununu's doing a decent job. And the thing to remember is for when you're making any kind of point, or you're having any kind of even halfway casual conversation with somebody about the topic, is to point out that we have only been dealing with coronavirus for about 6 months. Sununu's been in office since 2016, and he's been vetoing since 2018. And if you are a Democrat and you vote for Democrats and then go and you vote for Sununu on the top of the ticket, you are effectively voting for absolutely nothing to happen. You are voting for status quo, absolutely no change. That's it. So that is you're what you're doing with that vote is you're completely undermining the functionality of government. You're literally saying, "Oh yeah, I co-sign nothing working." That's the argument, right? Rather than talking about it in terms of this or that candidate, explain it to somebody in the context of literally them sitting in the booth, right? Like, or at their kitchen table or wherever, if you're doing absentee ballots, right? Your desk, your what have you. You've got the ballot in front of you. And ask yourself, like encourage folks, right? Encourage folks to ask themselves, what's the relationship between the person that I'm voting for here and the person that I'm voting for over here? How, if I vote for this person up top, how easy or difficult is it then going to be for this person three bubbles down to be able to do their job? If I'm voting for, oh, well, I like the idea of a Republican governor who applies checks to the Democrats, who generally I think I agree with a lot of things, but I would consider myself fiscally conservative, and so I like the idea of a balanced government. All right, let's say we take some sort of asinine take like that, right? Sure, it seems like it might have some reason to it, some balanced some balanced logic, but let's examine that a little bit more, shall we? So if this is the truth, then it would stand to reason that we would look at, okay, well, what kinds of gains have we made coming out of this? What kind of positive legislation have we passed, and what was shot down? And at that point, you go over every single bill with that person, and you say, well, do you support this? Oh, yeah, sure. I think that I'm absolutely supportive of a reasonable increase to net metering costs, because naturally, as the costs of energy increase, to produce that energy, the costs to the consumer will have to go up. Like, okay, so you understand basic fucking market principles. How then? How then do you justify voting for a governor who will prevent this exact legislation for which you're voting for? And like, how do you choose a governor who will vote against the exact legislation which further down the ballot you are voting for? It's a contradiction. And so the point is to try and highlight to people, well, if you're gonna, you're gonna vote, make it make sense. Not everybody like when you say vote down ticket, like if you're saying something like that, right? Like that's actually a very political insider thing to say. Most I feel like probably a lot of people, when they hear someone say something like that, they're already starting to glaze over, because it's just this like, and it's just, oh God, dragging political discussion that just never ends, and it's just, oh, we're just getting back into the rhetoric. Fuck, stop doing that. Really, you want to encourage somebody to be more conscious about the way they're voting. Approach those people, right? Like, I don't know who I'm giving this advice to. Maybe I'm giving this advice to somebody who's like encountering weird centrists all the time. Maybe I'm giving this advice to an activist who's trying to figure out how to deal with their mindset when they're going door knocking, or like, I don't know who I'm giving this advice to. Maybe I'm giving it to myself. Always try to create value in like acknowledge that you see and understand the value of the participation of the individual that you were discussing, right? Because the argument I just made is basically telling that person outright, well, what you're doing is basically nothing. And the question is, how do you tell somebody that they're doing nothing but encourage them to be, that they are still doing something, right? Like, how do you lift up that power but promote or try and shine a light on the fact that maybe the entirety of the idea wasn't fully considered prior to trying to engage with it? And not so much saying, hey, it's your fault. It's more like, hey, I believe in you. I know you know this. Like, I can see that you have this reason. It's about faith. It's about having faith in somebody to be able to get themselves to a point where they understand, because they want to understand and they want to have more control over their lives. And they want to be able to make a better, like a difference, and a meaningful, positive difference in other people's lives, because I think most people do. like even people that we might consider deplorable still probably want to make other people's lives better to a certain extent. I'm sure that's just something that's real. And so the question is, okay, how do we get back in touch with that? And I think this type of an argument is a much stronger argument against somebody like Governor Sununu. Now, that makes even more sense when you look at how this friggin' bonehead decided to handle some of his nonprofit emergency relief fund allocation, which he just decided he was going to, take full unadulterated control over. And here we have something that came out as a tweet this is from the Senate Democrats. We have a press release here. The recently released list of New Hampshire nonprofit emergency relief fund grantees revealed that Governor Chris Sununu awarded nearly $65,000 to a crisis pregnancy center in Rochester, as reported in the American Independent today. The crisis pregnancy centers provide prenatal advice and care from an anti-abortion perspective, often providing misleading, coercive, and inaccurate information that may delay or interfere with access to abortion and contraceptive services or improperly influence reproductive health decisions, according to the Guttmacher Institute, I believe is how you pronounce that. That's just gross. It really, like, this one, this one really just sits wrong, for me. That's really like, I just, the place itself is called Options for Women, a Pregnancy Help Center on 120 Washington Street in Rochester, New Hampshire. They received $64,694.25. Something to note is that a lot of public health didn't get nearly the support that it needed to get during this. Most of the organizations that received over 100,000 were more had to do with craftsmanship, economic related things. So it kind of showed, in my opinion, where the priorities were. Yeah, so yeah, I guess, sorry for the dead space, folks. This is the website. And this is, I think, something that I want to do, especially following this news, is I want to try and have Josie Pinto back on soon to discuss some of this stuff, because Josie's actually probably the real expert on this topic. And rather than shoving my foot too deep into my mouth on an issue that I don't entirely feel, like I have too much that I should be saying about it, because frankly I don't have a uterus, so I don't. I don't think I have the same clout or even authority to speak on this issue as some of my colleagues that I've had on this show before. So, but at any rate, they kind of hide it here on their website, but there is a certain way that they talk about, we're going to try and provide as many options to not have an abortion as possible. And I think this comes down to the reproductive health of the new mother. It comes down to the ultimate choice. It comes down to the safety, and it's really inappropriate for that kind of relief money to be going to something that is rooted in I don't like to wade into the pro-choice, pro-life debate very often, because I am very, very staunchly pro-choice. I think I absolutely believe in people's right to practice religion freely. I absolutely believe in people's right to choose the way that they want to be spiritual. That's all okay with me. I think that I have a huge problem with the fact that much of the pro-life argument is coming directly from religious groups that benefit, their internal hegemonies very much so benefit from the continued existence of a sexist hierarchy. They just do. It's how they've run for centuries, in some cases millennia, and not just sexism, but also racism as well. The fact of the matter is that there's a long tradition of needing to control the bodies of others, and it is just simply by the process of humanity's development in social contexts, going all the way from feudalism to today. It just makes sense that capitalism is more or less a graduated form of feudalism that doesn't create the same royalties, but still maintains the same sort of caste system. That it still operates off a lot of the same functions, and ultimately the tools of maintaining those systems, like racism, like sexism, like that, the subjugation of others, just centuries long torture and murder and insult and dereliction when it comes to responsibility for caring for or even acknowledging the humanity of especially Black Americans, whether naturalized here or originally ancestors coming in on slave ships. I mean, like, these are all tools of a capitalist system, which really just took off in the early 1800s, ultimately. And so much of a part of this was the controlling of the body of others. And that is often rooted in religion, because that sort of religion was so has been so directly tied into so many societies over the years, to a point where we actually had to say we need to separate church and state here in the United States. And then you look at that, and even that doesn't fucking work, because you've got the family, you've got, with C Street, and it's it's absurd. To go back to my favorite word there, we don't do an adequate enough job of separating church and state, and we don't do nearly a good enough job of reconciling the interaction and subsequent dissonance that occurs between government and spirituality, not to be confused with religion. But at the end of the day, we end up with advocacy groups that will, like Options Pregnancy Resource Center, that emphasizes all of the options over abortion rather than helping the individual who's coming in for consult to really deal with what they need to, and that there's a deeper agenda, and actual relief money that was raised through tax dollars is being spent on this. And I do not know how that continues a separation of church and state. And from a certain perspective, giving that money to that organization could be viewed as somewhat unconstitutional. And if we're dealing with, like if like you'd hear, and you constantly do hear, all kinds of decrying from the right if government money were to be given to Planned Parenthood, even if that money is not to be used for abortion services, right? You'll still get the clamoring. So why it's okay to give money to these groups? Give me a break. So there's just a little bit of a lot of gross hypocrisy on the part of Governor Sununu, and more reason why we need to get this jackass out of office. The problem, though, is that he's Bobby fucking Newport, as I say a million times, and people just think he's funny and nice. They just like him, and they just think he's a nice guy, and ultimately, I just do not see Dan having that charisma to overcome that. And the way you get a less interesting candidate to overcome a more charismatic candidate is to expose the other candidate for just how much of a lie their actual campaign itself is. And very much of what Sununu does is based off of saying no. And I know that conservatives really love, saying no. Like, you can be a conservative and you can campaign on saying no, and that's enough. The reality is, for progressives, you got to have something more than that. For even centrists, you got to offer something more than that. And so I would point back to sort of the more comprehensive tackle that I just did on that issue. Folks. let's get to something truly ridiculous. Just like top tier, top shelf ridiculous. So in Cheshire County, there was an uncontested race with the GOP for sheriff. And local member of FreeKeene, which it had at a time been directly associated with the Free State Project, which is a group of libertarian. The Free State Project is a group of libertarians who have moved to, or vowed to move to, or already live in New Hampshire because they had determined that it was the most friendly state to essentially stage government takeover in, and then dismantle that state's government and even potentially secede, right? So that was the original premise for the Free State Project. Now, as that's gone on, they've sort of had to reel back certain things, certain positions or things that they've said, or positions that they've taken, whatever, right? Now, FreeKeene is a subset that was born of a subgroup that was born of the Free State Project, but later came to represent views so radical that even the Free State Project had to disavow them. Most prominently, before I get into any of the specific story about Aria, I just want to give this sort of introduction to this is an introduction to just how and folks, this is the part in the stream where things are going to get really like gross language wise. So for anybody that's got a problem with discussion of pedophilia, tune out right now, because this shit is fucking horrible. But frankly, if you are a leftist and you are not aware of this, I really need you to be aware of this. So if, I know it's vile, but try as you might, please stick it out, because this is oh gosh, we really need to be aware that this is the type of thing that goes on in this state, and that when people say it's ridiculous,
why do you want
to talk about the conspiracy of like pedophile conspiracy stuff, this is exactly why I do not think it's something that we should not be worried about. We absolutely need to be concerned about this. So here is the at least at the generally leader of FreeKeene, Ian Bernard, and his problematic views on child sexuality.
Occasion seem to imply that sexual contact between children and adults is acceptable.
Well, I think that people can consent to the behavior they would like to engage in.
What do you believe the age of consent to be?
I think that it's whenever you're able to make that decision for yourself.
So, in other words, according to you, say, I don't know, a 6-year-old, they could consent. They could decide to consent to sexual contact with an adult.
I think that it's really, while I might find that reprehensible personally, it's really none of my business.
So you don't think that would be a crime?
I can tell you, sir, that I engaged in sexual contact with somebody who was 16 when I was 10, and
I thought it was 11.
People would call whatever. I don't remember exactly what year it happened, but I was pretty darn young, and I was fully able to make that decision for myself. Would you call that a crime?
Absolutely, of course, it's a crime.
Why?
Children don't have the developmental ability to consent. I mean, that is just a clear, obvious fact, and it's simply disturbing that you wouldn't understand that. But I have an idea on why you might not, and that's because many abuse victims, due to the psychological trauma of the abuse, make up excuses for their abuser and basically blame themselves.
Oh, no, I don't feel like I was abused. I consented. You understand that? See, this is what's very insulting to me, that you can sit there and say, well, you were too young. You didn't know what the hell you were doing. You're 10 years old. You can't make those decisions. That was illegal what happened. That was a crime. And I'm telling you, Joe, that I absolutely knew what I was doing. I made the choice to climb out of my window at night. I made the choice to climb in his window. And I made the choice to engage in the activities I engaged in. Not him. He didn't force me into it.
He got video games out of it.
Ian, that's a totally ridiculous idea. You're fooling yourself. And
it's ridiculous that I am an individual who can make choices?
Let him finish.
Not at 11 years old. I highly suggest you see the psychiatrist, Dr. Ross. His website is rossinst.com. And if you find that challenging to believe, perhaps your co-host may want to consider, what you're making the liberty movement in your own show look like in saying these utterly criminal, ridiculous
what I'm
topics.
making the movement look like by being honest about myself and my life and my choices.
Well, wait a second, Joe. I agree.
This infuriates me, by the way.
I agree with you that this it disturbs me when he talks about stuff like this, and I've been on the show for a long time now, and I wonder to myself the same things that you've asked. Now, I would never level an accusation at him like that, but I wonder, how did his gay child prostitution affect his decision-making skills today? But I guess I have to ask some questions. So,
maybe it made me a little more open-minded toward the ability of young people to be able to make decisions for themselves.
You sound open-minded right now. But what I have to ask Joe, I have to ask you some questions. So he made some decisions, and let's call it 10 years old. He had previously said 11, so it probably spanned a period of months and maybe.
Now, here's a question I have for you guys. How many people in the Free State movement have a similar mentality to Ian on this issue?
I would say it's probably minimal. That's my opinion. I think that most people in the Free State Project movement would be.
How would we know? Most people wouldn't talk about this.
It's just a guess. Right. Most people
are afraid to talk about it if they did feel
I'll tell you what, Joe, we'll bring it back here in a moment. Hang on if you don't mind. 800-259-9231. Because I've got some questions for Joe about what he's defining as rape. There wasn't actually any intercourse that went on in my situation. Was that rape? It's Free Talk Live. My belief system in regards to young people very young people and their ability or inability to consent to sexual activity. I say that they can. You say they can't. However, you said that you think that the free market should be able to handle it. And, of course, I agree with you on that point. I think that if people are doing
I just wanted to call up and
free market should handle child sexuality. Okay.
It sounds like obvious facts, and I think it's something.
What the fuck?
I mean, how could this not hurt your show? How could this not hurt the liberty movement?
Oh, I think that it has hurt the show. I think that this very conversation has lost us an advertiser that we had for quite some time. And I try to get Ian. We have had this conversation on and off the air that I don't want him to ever talk about this issue. But
I'll just talk about it more then.
Right, because he's a stubborn guy, and
I think it's an important issue.
He needs to see a psychiatrist. End of story.
Well,
you're a jackass.
I'm
going to disagree with you there. I know Ian personally, and was that he seems unusually well adjusted, like one of the most happiest sort of calm, taking things in stride kind of people I know.
He does not sound well adjusted at any moment.
For him to go see a psychologist to get fixed, to get repaired.
So you don't believe that him espousing a view. You don't believe that him saying on the radio that 6-year-olds can have sex with adults. You don't think that's a reason to see a psychiatrist?
Joe, I've just talked to you, and
he's expressing something that he believes. He may be wrong about that, and like I said, it may be disturbing to me. But no, I don't
didn't say they should. Hold on a second, Joe. I didn't say they should have sex with adults. I said I might find that reprehensible, but it's none of my damn business. Personally, I think that young people can make decisions for themselves. But Mark, you had a question you wanted to ask.
Right.
Joe.
Well, Joe, it's a continuum here, and
it's a continuum.
call. Appreciate hearing from you. I think people like Joe are ruining the liberty movement by their level of intolerance towards other people's sexual decisions. 800
I think it's a shocking issue, and it's
Yeah.
very
What the
difficult for people
fuck?
to address. And I think that maybe you should consider that when you bring it up.
Toll-free number is 800-259-9231. You can bring up anything here. This is Free Talk Live.
So, all right, that's all that bullshit that I'm, that's, and I'm sorry that I played that entire thing, but it's like I need y'all to understand exactly who the group that Aria DiMezzo comes from is, okay? And this is back, that video, as for anybody who's watching may have seen on the bottom, is from 2014. So these aren't new ideas. Like, this has been around. Free State Project knew about it long before they disavowed Ian Bernard and FreeKeene. Now DiMezzo, here's the thing, is that these people they might be egregious, grotesque, vile idiots because of positions like that, right? Absolutely. Here's the thing. They know exactly what they're doing when it comes to getting in and messing with the electoral process, with trying to figure out how to game state politics, local politics, right? And Aria DiMezzo's campaign for sheriff is the perfect example, right? Because what she did is she walked into an uncontested GOP race with absolutely no challenger to speak of. And basically, like, managed to completely walk away with the GOP nomination, in large part because people just voted. They didn't necessarily think about who they were ticking off. They just voted down the ballot, right? Vote down ticket. Kind of like what I'm talking about. And you never take a moment to inspect those candidates, right? How many of my viewers who are really, active voters, they would say they are involved in paying attention to politics, walked into their local office and didn't know somebody who was on the ballot, didn't understand the difference between certain candidates, wasn't aware of somebody on the ballot, right? This exposes that. And while, it's so funny how often I end up putting New Hampshire Journal on here. I loathe these guys, man, but sometimes it's just the only real option. Maybe it's the easiest. This particular article looks like it was sourced from another location, so it doesn't feel like it has the same precise political slant to it that I would expect from New Hampshire Journal and their incredibly conservative coverage of things. So believe, and we can look up Cornerstone really quick. Yeah, Cornerstone Action and Cornerstone Policy are nonpartisan, nonprofit organizations made up of caring, passionate people working for the people of New Hampshire. We are one of the 40 state organizations associated with each other. We honor God and are dedicated to serving our beautiful state and its people, focusing on the key issues like life, marriage and family, parental rights, education, religious freedom, and gender. Okay, so they are absolutely partisan, and great, now we know that. So even coming from what, the classic New Hampshire, we're nonpartisan, but really we're actually very, very socially and fiscally conservative. Coming from this classic misdirection, I really fucking hate that, man. When are people gonna actually call this out more? Like, dude, who the hell do they think they are putting nonpartisan on their website? I'm going to put that back. I didn't even put it up for you folks. Y'all going to have to see this. This is absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. This is absolutely ridiculous. Right? Look at this. Look at this nonsense. This stuff is horrible. I'm sorry. That's so. Anyways, back over to the article, right? Like, clearly, to me, this is coming from a very conservative perspective, despite nonpartisan. And I really, like, people call this shit out every single day. Seriously, call this out all the time. I'm tired of it. I'm so tired of it, because this is how the Overton window moves right. Okay, like, period. This is exactly how they get the Overton window to move right. They point out in this race, no other Republican candidates. Voters were uninformed. Trust was misplaced. We are too apathetic about local government. Essentially, folks need to learn more. Look, there are certain aspects to DiMezzo that I'm not entirely opposed to. Like, look, I have no problem with having a trans person run for office. Totally co-sign that. I have my qualms about people who identify as Satanists. Not because I have any problem with Satanism, but because I genuinely want to understand what sect of Satanism, like what particular subset of Satanism they agree with, because honestly, most Satanism is really just anti-Christianity. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's just like kind of some edgelord shit. And then, the anarchist part is really the part that I think everybody needs to hone in on, right? There's absolutely value in anarchist ideas, and anarchism in itself is a very, very wide-ranging philosophy or just idea in general. Now, it can get played out in a whole lot of ways. So when you see anybody use the word anarchist, the very first thing you need to do is find out what kind of anarchist they are. Now, the fact that we see Satanist next to it can kind of give us a tip, right? Like, not 100, but it can kind of give us a clue in the right direction. We can get sort of the impression that this particular individual is the type of person that is interested in playing the low gross shot, the controversial shot, the for lack of a better word, deplorable or detestable shot in the interests of making a wave, even if the point itself is generally fairly accurate. Do I agree with Aria's sentiment of fuck the police? Yeah, sure, maybe a little bit. Like, yeah, I don't like the authoritarianism, and And in that way, I do ascribe to or participate in anarchistic ideas. But it's always controlled and measured and managed. It's the association with the Free State Project, and even more specifically FreeKeene, that really tells you exactly what this means, right? It is essentially anarcho-capitalism. It is a type of libertarianism. It's just another kind of libertarian. And as you know, as you've heard in the previous clip with Ian Bernard, libertarians themselves don't even necessarily agree on what they believe. And what DiMezzo did, honestly, isn't even that, like, outrageous. Like, everybody's so shocked, and this story made national news. And the fact of the matter is, like, there's nothing new here. People do this all the time. People look for uncontested races. They put somebody in. They put in somebody who's way out of line and count on folks just, you know, like, they genuinely count on ain't nobody challenging them during a primary, and then just generally don't care about, you know, aren't as concerned with the general, because something like this will happen where a lot of attention gets drawn to it, and then that new candidate gets a lot of press. I mean, shit, I'm doing it right now. Meanwhile, their actual sheriff isn't really that bad. And you could just continue to vote for him. I think it's funny because I don't know why anybody watching my channel would, watching my channel non-ironically anyways, or not for a salt watch. I'd have no idea why anybody viewing this right now would be voting for a GOP candidate. It's entirely possible, but I'm just generally, I don't think that's my audience at all. Don't let the identity politics side of it fool you, okay? Like, I'm totally cool with identity, and I'm totally, like, I absolutely want to see many more trans people elected to positions of power. I want to see them in office. I want to see people from a trans movement people who live trans lives, who experience the world from a trans experience. I want those folks to have equal, equitable participation in our governmental lawmaking process, right? I also fucking want those people to agree with me. Like, I do not agree with this person. And as awesome as having someone's campaign slogan be "fuck the police" is, as awesome as, you know, having such a different type of candidate in the mix, you know, as awesome as it is to have such a wide variety of people being willing to just throw things out there, this ain't it, folks. And as awesome as it is to watch this friggin' video right here.
Well, we got Turd Ferguson on Discord, who is a regular listener to the LRN.FM feed. Turd, what do you think, and why do you think it?
Well, it was actually pretty interesting listening to Cuxt for Cuntwell dumb me down for the past 48 minutes. To be honest,
hang up on this fucking asshole.
No,
I'm not. I will walk out of this fucking studio.
Then
Hang
walk
up on
out,
that
man. This is an open line. It's always been unscripted and totally open. We've let you say whatever you wanted to say. Now let people say whatever they want to say.
Fucking talk shit to me like that.
Did you just walk out of the studio?
He is in the process of doing so right now.
All right. Okay, all right. I'll hang up. All right.
If you would like to apologize for your insults and would like to actually ask a question,
on behalf of
hold on, because you should be the bigger person and accept the apology.
I'll do it.
Then walk the fuck out. You're a coward. Walk out.
On behalf of the LRN listeners.
No, Turd Ferguson, because he just walked the fuck out. Because you called him bad names. You triggered him and he walked the fuck out. Let him fucking go.
Yeah, so look, as entertaining though it may be for us to watch a clip of Christopher Cantwell being called that and watching him totally just turn into a little baby, be the crying Nazi that he is, and just run out of the room. As entertaining as it is for us to watch that, we have to remember that in this very clip, Aria is continuing to platform Christopher Cantwell long after Charlottesville. And that's it. If you're in any way pissed about Christopher Cantwell being in New Hampshire, you don't like that the crying Nazi from Charlottesville lives in fucking Keene, if you want to be anti that, then get quick about understanding exactly who that candidate for sheriff is. Okay? Again, nothing against how Aria identifies. That's all well and fine. We're all allowed to identify however we want. There are certain aspects, there are certain components of how Aria identifies that shows exactly the type of political understanding and worldview and framing that Aria has on processes, and should call into question anybody's willingness to actually give a serious vote to that candidate, however much you may dislike her opponent. Her opponent, by the way, is Eli Rivera, and to my understanding, I will try and have somebody from Cheshire on to the show to maybe discuss this a little bit, but to my understanding, Eli is not so bad. So there's that. And yeah. Fucking wow. All right, folks. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit the little bell for the notifications so you can get hit up whenever we go live. Become a supporter on Patreon, okay? This is super serious. It makes it possible for me to really not let the ball slip from week to week. It gives me a way to sustain doing this channel, to be able to just sort of keep everything afloat. This is something that I want to continue to expand, working with Jonah this week to try and get deep dive back up and going. It's been a bit chaotic lately. I've definitely had some things happen in my own life, housing situation changes, potential changes, things like that, and it's made it more challenging to just sort of get everything together. So that was part of the reason why there was a bit of a hiatus last week. But again, back on it again. I know today was a solo stream, so no interviews this time around, but tomorrow I've got Sherry Frost on, so that is a well-anticipated interview. Really looking forward to that. I know folks are going to be hyped, so definitely tune in for that. And just generally keep your eye out, because we've got a whole bunch more coming down the pipe. It's it's going to be real. It's going to be good, folks. So thanks so much for tuning in today, everyone. I hope y'all have had an excellent week. I hope the Volinsky folks out there aren't too bumming. Don't worry, we'll get through this. General election sucks. We'll get out of it. Just keep planning, keep looking, keep hoping, because you know what? We will be able to get through the nonsense, and I do believe that eventually we will have some real meaningful stuff going on. I think the wind is slowly changing direction. So with that, cheers, folks. Take care, and I will catch you tomorrow.
You